Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Right here.
I'm Ed Gallagher, President of the American Scandinavian Foundation, and it's my great pleasure on behalf of the Foundation, our Chairman Bente Svensson-Frans, and myself to welcome President Grímsson to Scandinavia House today. Also to welcome the First Lady Dora Messiah. We're very pleased to have you with us. We'll be seeing you later at our annual gala, but right now it's my pleasure to be able to say a few words of introduction for the President. President Grímsson was elected to his fifth term in 2012, making him the longest-serving president in Iceland's history. During the 18 years of his presidency, Iceland has undergone enormous change. As we have heard here, the nation has faced extraordinary challenges and crises. Through it all, President Grímsson has led with a firm and steady hand. His achievements on the international stage have been extensive. Among the many awards he has received are the 2008 Nehru Award for International Understanding and the Indira Gandhi Peace Prize. He's more recently been the moving force behind the creation of the Arctic Circle, which was formed last year to facilitate international dialogue on the Arctic and its future. President Grímsson has been a patron of the ASF since 1996. Tonight, at our annual gala, we will present the gold medal to him in recognition of his leadership and vision and his dedication to furthering understanding and action on issues of vital importance to Iceland and the world. It's a great pleasure and honor to be able to introduce to you President Ólafur Grímsson.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and it's a great pleasure for Doris and I to be with you here this morning. We apologize due to other engagement. We were not able to be with you from the very beginning, but what we have witnessed is not only a fascinating and interesting discussion and comparison between the experience, the reforms, but as well the challenges that our two countries face in this important challenge of bringing greater gender equality to our people. I was reflecting on it as I listened to some of the comments in the panels, that although while looking at Iceland in the first years of the 21st century, you might marvel at the success and the transformation, and somehow form the conclusion that it has been a relatively easy path. But that's not so. Although the political culture of our country is peaceful and cooperative and highly democratic and open, we don't have to go far back to remember, those of us who are still active and alive, that the situation was completely different. We are even in the presidential residence reminded every day in the old house that before the Republic was founded in the middle of the last century, in the early years of the 20th century, that house belonged to a remarkable political couple who lived there with their kids, published their weekly newspaper from the premises, but among the top of their agenda was to fight for the right of women to vote, the right of women to be treated as citizens, and not to suffer in the ways that they did in Iceland during that time. Those were also the years where women, as well as men, did not belong to trade unions in Iceland, had no organized way of campaigning for their economic and social positions. And when I was a young professor at the University of Iceland in the 70s, and we established the Faculty of Social Sciences, among the first tasks we were given by the Parliament was to prepare and publish a report on gender equality in Iceland. It was the first attempt to try to map out, first of all, the situation, but on the basis of the data, present an analysis of what was ahead. And I edited that report and it was published around the middle of the 70s. And our conclusion was a great disappointment to many in the leadership of the fight for gender equality in Iceland, because the analysis presented described that there were processes through the educational system, to local government, through the lower stages of the business world, which would perhaps, in a matter of 15, 20, 25, 30 years, change the situation. And when we presented that report, there were many who were highly disappointed because they wanted change here and now, obviously and understandably. But looking back on it, the report was pretty accurate, because in the last 10, 20 years, we have seen a remarkable transformation in especially the public life in Iceland, in the civil service, and in the perhaps more political part of our societies. I remember when I first started to follow Icelandic politics as a kid, as a young man, there were only 1 or 2 women in the Icelandic parliament. And nobody ever thought of giving them leadership positions, either in government or in the political parties. Now we can truly present the country as the first, and perhaps so far, I haven't checked thoroughly, but definitely the first, perhaps the only so far, regrettably, country in the world where all the highest offices of the state have been held by women. So there are no glass ceilings to be broken in Iceland, so far as political high office is concerned. The presidency was mentioned before. Then the prime ministership, the presidency of the parliament, equal to the speaker here in the United States, and then the presidency of the Supreme Court. All these top offices in our state have been held in the last 20 years by women, and some of them more often than once. And recently, the church also elected the first woman bishop, the only head of the church. So these 2 great traditional institutions in Western society, the state and the church in Iceland, have now both broken that glass ceiling. That leaves the business world. And paradoxically, I think we face a situation in our country where it's now up to the market to catch up with the state, which somehow paradoxically is the reverse challenge in many other discussions. Although it is true, and images are important, television is important, as the pictures of my predecessors showed in the first years when she served in office. Little girls saw on the television screen that women could also become president. So we have, of course, seen in Iceland in recent years some of our leading corporations being headed by women. We have 3 aluminum smelters in Iceland, owned by Rio Tinto, Alcoa, and Century Aluminum, prominent American global companies. 3 of those aluminum smelters in Iceland are headed by women. One of them was the first woman in the world to be a head of an aluminum smelter. And she has served with such a distinction that that smelter, although relatively old by global standards, has received many awards for safety, for enlightenment in employment treatment, and in many, many other areas. We have the largest trade union in Iceland in the private sector, now headed by a woman. The National Association of Federal, State, and Municipal Employees has also for a number of years been headed by a woman. One of the 3 largest banks in Iceland has, after the collapse of the financial sector, been headed by a woman. and our oldest and biggest university. The presidency of that university is also in the hands of a woman. So, of course, there are many daily examples that come through the media, through how young people experience society, that see women not only holding offices of the state and the church. And let me, as a footnote, remind all of us that for the most part of my generation, it was a battle to have the first woman ordained as a priest in Iceland. And she even had difficulty in getting elected to serve in a parish, because in the Icelandic church, it is those who constitute the parish that elect the priest. So don't let's think it was easy within the church. It was also a tough battle. But we have now all these incidences, all this presentation of women heading trade unions, heading major corporations, also the pharmaceutical division of Actavis, and many others. But as has come out in the discussion here today, despite this extraordinary achievement in relatively short time, in fact, most of it has happened in the last 30 years or so, which is an extraordinarily short time when you are trying to execute profound social reforms and bring the role of women forward in our societies, in the state, in the church, and in the public sector as well as the private sector, is a profound reform. The discussion here today has reminded us that there are big challenges still left in my country. And I somehow am of the opinion that they will not be solved by simply talking about gender equality, because they are more fundamental structural reforms. And I will give you a concrete example. The recent panel talked a lot about the case of startup companies in Iceland. Startup companies, whether they are in the IT sector, the tourism sector, the design sector, and whatever sectors that, or commercial sector that you find small startup companies. And of course, this is equal for men and women. But we don't have any structures in our financial system in Iceland with emphasis of opening the doors, creating easier roadmaps, as well as paving the way for startup companies, for young women or men to come forward with their ideas, their capabilities. The largest financial capability in Iceland is in the pension funds. The pension funds in Iceland don't have the right to come together and invest aggressively in startup companies. But they are the largest financial resource in our country, as has been demonstrated by their ownership after the collapse of the banks and the financial crisis in most of the major sectors in our country. I don't believe that without a fundamental structural reform of our pension system and the abilities and the role of the pension funds, we will be able to pave the way for women to enter the business sector, the marketplace, in a way that they both could and should. Because if we only think about this transform from the point of view of corporations and the structure within large companies, it will first of all take a long time. It will secondly be a tough battle. And thirdly, it will be a waste of talent, an opportunity for countries to not open the doors more easily for people to do it themselves, on their own terms, with their own capabilities. And we need a transformative thinking, not just on the gender debate in Iceland, but on the whole economic debate in Iceland, to realize that our way forward is not just through big investment and big corporations, but through opening the door for people to start small companies in their own way through their own talent, like Facebook, like Google, like Microsoft. I often say to people, if you watch the movie Social Network, which is about how Facebook was created by college boys who wanted an easier method to meet girls. If you have watched that movie, watch it again. But the second time, only think about the year it takes place. Only think about the year it takes place. And I'm not going to tell you the year because I want you to go back and watch it. And now over 1 billion people are using Facebook. I have often told this story about Usher. I can tell it again, Jon. That I remember vividly when I was a leader of a political party in Iceland and we had our offices on the 3rd floor in a rather small building in one of the streets in Reykjavik. And there was this little sign on the 2nd floor which said Usher. And I had no idea what it really was because there was some guy in 2 rooms trying to create artificial legs, I was told. I think it's relatively recently that I was a leader of the political party. I know some people want to forget it. Maybe I want to forget it myself. It's a different story. But I remember when Usher was only in 2 rooms on the 2nd floor in this building in Hverfisgata. Now it's the leading global company that has come out of Iceland, so global that the CEO lives in California. So we have a multitude of examples that the way forward for our economy is not to be talking about it all the time. Do we get yet another aluminum company to invest in Iceland? Do we get big international companies to come and place themselves in Iceland? The big question is how we enable young women and men to do their own thing and lead the country forward. And that is a debate more about the fundamental reform of our society, which will, I believe, as a byproduct, transform the final sector where the reform about gender equality in Iceland has to take place aggressively, and that is the business sector. That's the truth, in my opinion. The politics will take care of itself. We have already seen that. That's on the way well enough, especially if we compare it with the report we wrote in the early 1970s. I believe the church is also on its way to embracing women in a very strong way. We see it also in the theology faculty at the university. I think within the trade unions, we are also seeing leadership from women in a very strong way. The sector that is lacking behind is the financial and the business sector. And that is why I welcome that it's also the Icelandic American Chamber of Commerce, which has brought this gathering together with the other partners. And I think it's a very necessary debate. It's a very important debate. And what we have learned here today, and I will say this very openly to my Icelandic friends, it's clear from the panels and the discussions we have heard today, it's also an area where the US can teach us a lot. Can teach us a lot. Because there's a certain barrier in Iceland, we think we have done so well that we are in the role of teaching others. But I think we have witnessed here today, giving some of the practices in the business sector and the corporate world in America, and the startup companies and the finances and so on, that we should also try to learn from the United States in this way. And that, to me, has been a very important contribution made by this discussion. It was a necessary correction of the compass for us in Iceland. And from that point of view, I want to thank you very much for having brought us together for this dialogue today. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the President for his remarks, and this comes to the end of our conference. I think it was a great dialogue, and I think we will take this and we will carry it on, and we will keep this dialogue going between the people that we have brought together here today and into the future. So thank you for this being with us this morning. Thank you, Nancy, for working with us on this, and Ed, also the American Scandinavian Foundation for lending us your facility and working with us. Thank you all, and have a good day.